There's this gentleman named Troy Nash. Now this man is 20 years old. He is a prospect, and the first time that I heard about him was leading up to the Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence fight. And I remember the man did an interview and he said, Terence Crawford has never looked this dangerous, and I predict that the man is going to put on an absolute of a demolition job. I was like, could this be true? But I actually picked Terence Crawford for that fight by stoppage, but I wasn't too sure. I was scared because he was going up against Errol Spence, so I wasn't really too sure about my prediction. But nonetheless, what do you know? The man turned out to be on the money, as they say. The man literally predicted everything. Crawford looked better than ever, looked stronger than ever that night. He looked absolutely perfect. Now, this man, Troy Nash, he just came out yesterday and he said that he's been spending this entire camp with Terence Crawford just like he did for the Spence camp. He spent the entire camp for Spence with Bud. And ladies and gentlemen, the man just came out and said that Terence Crawford is looking bigger than ever, sharper than ever, more dangerous than ever, and most importantly, he looks like the greatest version of himself. Now, can we actually believe this? Can Terence Crawford at nearly 39 years old, with him being inactive, with him being heavier than ever, is it possible that the man will actually look better than ever? Now, let's think about it, ladies and gentlemen. When you're talking about someone like Terence Crawford or Canelo Alvarez, you're talking about the elite of the elite. And if I'm going to be honest, Terence Crawford, when he fought Errol Spence, in my opinion, in all my years of watching combat sports, I'm a MMA guy turned into boxing. But I have never, ever in my life watched an elite championship fight and had my jaw absolutely drop to the floor with the greatness that I witnessed. And that is the only way to describe what Terence Crawford did versus Errol Spence. In my opinion, that was the greatest performance in our lifetime. I mean, I can't go back to the old days. I'm not a historian. But as far as I'm concerned, that was the greatest performance I have ever seen in my life. And especially to who he did it to. Errol Spence, dangerous southpaw at the time. I believe he was pound for pound number 3. And Terence Crawford absolutely annihilated him. Now, could this man, Troy Nash, be on the money again? Let's think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's think about it. Terence Crawford, if you actually look at the man's character, if you actually look at the man's demeanor and mindset, Terence Crawford delivers his best performances when he is doubted the most. Let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen. And to be completely honest, this is by far his toughest challenge and his best opponent yet. It doesn't get any better than Canelo Alvarez, ladies and gentlemen. And especially when you're moving up 2 weight divisions in a year and 3 weight divisions in 3 years. Going up against the top dog, Canelo Alvarez, the pride of Guadalajara, Mexico. But please, before I continue my point, do you believe this man? Let me know in the comments. But in my opinion, I believe it. I believe that Terence Crawford, at nearly 39 years old, the man, I don't think that the man is physically in his prime. Him or Canelo, both of them, when you're like Canelo with over 70 fights, and when you're like Crawford, the man has been professional for God knows how long. The man is nearly 40 years old. If you actually think about it, the man is not too far from 40. So for both of them, it is virtually impossible for them to be at their absolute peak. And let me tell you why. If Canelo was at his peak, I don't believe that Edgar Berlanga could live with Canelo inside the ring for more than 3 rounds. Think about it, guys. Just think about it. Prime Canelo would annihilate Berlanga in 3 rounds. Prime Canelo would annihilate Jaime Munguia in 5 rounds. prime Canelo would cut the ring off and absolutely finish Jermell Charlo and John Ryder. So I don't believe that Canelo is in his peak when you talk about physically. Now mentally, he is smarter than ever. But if you actually think about it, when it comes to Terence Crawford, the only time where he fought someone where we all truly doubted him, not doubted him to win, but doubted his greatness, like we said, can the man actually deliver a perfect performance on the night? It was only against Errol Spence, if you actually think about it, ladies and gentlemen. Errol Spence was the only time where Terence Crawford stepped into the ring with true danger of having his entire legacy ruined. If Errol Spence, I mean, look at the legacy of Errol Spence now. Crawford ruined his legacy with the demolition job that he did on him. If Errol Spence would have done that to Terence Crawford, we would have doubted Crawford's entire career. But no. What did Bud do? He stepped up to the plate. And he stepped up to the occasion. That walkout, ladies and gentlemen, that walkout was iconic and epic. I mean, Terence Crawford put on a show that night. His walkout was a show. His weigh-in, his press conference, his performance, his post-fight interview and celebration with his mother. Everything about Terence Crawford that night was truly iconic and spectacular and generational. And that is why that night, Terence Crawford cemented himself as one of the most skilled and dangerous fighters of all time. Forget this era. When you talk about him and Canelo, you're not just talking about the two best fighters of this era. You're talking about the two best fighters of all time. And that is a fact. I don't care if you hate Canelo, or I don't care if you hate Crawford, or you dislike either man. You cannot deny their greatness. And that is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. So, getting back to our point, will Terence Crawford show up to shock the world? Will Terence Crawford show up with a violent and dangerous game plan? Yes, I believe so. Now, will he win? Will he do it? That is another story. But I promise you this, ladies and gentlemen. Terence Crawford, if he wasn't 1,000,000% confident that he was going to shock the world, he wouldn't have taken this fight and he wouldn't have trained this hard and locked himself in Denver, Colorado with absolute killers in preparation for this iconic showdown. And same goes for Canelo. If Canelo didn't truly believe 1,000,000% that he was going to come in and put on his career best performance, the man wouldn't have taken this fight. Because if you actually think about it, if Crawford loses, they're all going to say Crawford lost to a bigger man, no shame in that. If Crawford wins, they're going to say Crawford is, my goodness, he's one of the GOATs. If Canelo wins, they're going to say you were supposed to win. If Canelo loses, they're going to say, my goodness, you just lost to someone who is 2 to 3 divisions smaller than you. But don't buy that, ladies and gentlemen. Don't buy this narrative. Words can have lies in them, but your eyes can't lie. And when both men squared off against each other in the press conference, they virtually are the same size. Let's be honest. Let's be completely honest. Canelo is probably one of the smallest 168-pounders ever. And Crawford was a giant, well, not giant, but he was definitely a big 147-pounder. And Crawford started his career at 135 and Canelo started his career at 140. And they're both around the same height. Crawford, I believe, is an inch taller. And Canelo is like, Crawford's arms are even longer than Canelo's. So at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, if Canelo wins this fight, we cannot say that Canelo won because Crawford is a small man. I mean, both of them, if you're going to call Crawford small, then you might as well call Canelo small. If you're going to call Canelo big guy, then you might as well call Crawford the big guy. To be honest, this is just my opinion from what my eyes see. Because when I saw them facing off in the press conference, I didn't really see that much of a size difference, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, if Canelo faced off against David Benavidez, you're going to see a size difference. Not just height, but size, ladies and gentlemen. When you talk about size, you got to talk about height, length, thickness, everything you can think of. But Crawford and Canelo, I mean, they're very, very similar, ladies and gentlemen. But in this fight, no matter who wins and no matter what happens, nothing is certain and nothing can be promised. But one thing can be promised. Nothing can be promised except this. We are about to witness one of the most iconic showdowns in the history of boxing, live on Netflix, football stadium, Allegiant Stadium, for undisputed, for every single belt in boxing will be on the line. And from the setting itself, I promise you, both men will show up more dangerous than ever.